the coach is the leader. Craig, I want to go to you. Where does this topic start in terms of the coach's role in trying to, I guess, navigate the challenges of their key stakeholders in the form of the child, the athlete, and the parent, who obviously have a real interest in their child's sport?
Yeah, the more and more these days, I'm spending time thinking about a really important question, and that question is, what is it for? And so more and more discussions with coaches and with the organizations that they spend time and trying to understand what that question really means. And I really believe that the coach is the architect of the environment, and therefore the behaviors that show up in that environment. So I think that answering that question, what is it for, and having real clarity from a values and behaviors point of view is super interesting. And I think that's a key point that we need to spend some time trying to understand, whether it's going into the start of a season, or whether that's a group of coaches that fall under a larger organization, is to spend some time really discussing the answer to that question.
Reid, for you, any thoughts on the coach as the leader to kick things off?
Yeah, I would agree. The coach is sort of the standard bearer. And what we need to understand is that we are collaborators in this process with not just the athletes, but the parents on this journey. And if we do it right, we can work together to create the very best environment. But we have to drive that. And we need to communicate early and often. Don't be afraid to set rules of engagements of, what are the easiest ways to communicate, how, when, what type of topics we can discuss. And then also, my big thing was as the coach was, if I was constantly communicating with the parents and letting them know why we were doing the things we were doing, then they wouldn't answer those questions on their own, because sometimes they're on the other sideline trying to figure out what we're doing. And if I'm ahead of time telling them, we're not going to punt, we're going to play out of the back, or we're going to work on this week, so you'll see a lot of this, then they weren't filling in the blanks. They had already filled in the blanks for them, and they became partners in that process, allies, rather than trying to figure out what I was doing as a coach. So that's really where the leadership of a coach comes in, is helping fill in those blanks.
We're probably, I guess we're at the start of a winter season in New Zealand. You've both sort of alluded to the coach setting the environment. Reid, you've talked about the standard bearer, which I really like. What do you guys think when it comes to the take on setting standards and expectations, potentially the culture around the group, and whether the role of player ownership in there? Because for me, that there is an opportunity at the start of every season to be very clear in terms of expectations, both to players in our care and the parents who are involved. And at times we miss that opportunity.
Yeah, if I could share a story, and this happened 2 nights ago. I was speaking just at a local school in Auckland, and a year 13 came up to me at the end of the conversation, and I spent some time really talking about setting the culture. And she was really curious and asked a really poignant question, I thought, around, she was the captain of the team, and they'd lost a bunch of year 13s from the team as the year ticked over into 23. And she really was curious around what she could do alongside her coach to set the environment so that the girls had a great experience. And I thought that was a really great question. And we talked about essentially the expectations and what is it for, and what the girls wanted out of the experience, and to do that early. And so it was really cool to hear from someone that was in the mix of it and wanting to give it a crack.
Reid, for you, any thoughts on that one? I love the initiative. That's the thing that's coming through to me. I sometimes, that perhaps the cynic in me thinks that initiative is an attribute that's disappearing, and perhaps that can be a reflection on environments where coaches might not enable that to happen. So again, we've got to look at ourselves before we look at our athletes. But any thoughts on that, or any other thoughts around the coach in terms of setting that culture and the opportunities at the start of the year?
Sure. One, you're right. We can set that environment so that they feel comfortable coming forward and being assertive and asking those kinds of questions. And I love the fact that Dr. Craig was talking about the age, because you're never too young to empower athletes to have control of this process. If they are the ones driving the process, we can help them navigate. We can provide the tools and resources, but they're going to be far more committed and passionate about the sport if it's theirs, if they own it. And so when I said we're the standard bearers, or that we set the tone, one of the things that we always try to do with our teams is our athletes would actually set the goals for the season and would set the values for the team and would set up, all of those pieces of the puzzle. We'd work with the athletes, and then we would be the ones that would convey it to the parents that, hey, this is theirs. They created this, and I'm just letting you know about it. And I'm going to be the one that's going to carry that banner for them. And I don't become that nagging guy that's always pointing out the things that they're doing wrong or whatever. I become that accountability partner. Remember what we agreed on at the beginning of the season. Are we holding to that standard? And now they're the ones that feel that responsibility for it, because it was theirs in the first place.
I like that.
There's a great story from a guy, Owen Eastwood. If you haven't read Owen's book, Belonging, then I highly recommend you pick it up. And I was lucky enough to have him on my podcast not that long ago. And he really nicely articulated this idea of people are going to bring their own values. And one thing I've come to understand is that I don't have the right to tell someone what they value, because they've had a lived experience, and what they value is what they value. But what Owen talked about was this really nice coming together of values and creating space for our young people to share their story. And Owen talks a lot about whakapapa and how understanding where we've come from, be it a team or be it individuals, is really powerful to help us move forward, in the same direction. And so if we can spend time bringing and sharing our own values and then deciding on some of the things that the team can share, I think that's a really powerful way of bringing people together. So